welcome back. Today I want to make a photo album. Now I've made photo albums before and we're doing pretty much exactly the same thing here. Only I want to play a little bit more with the form of the book itself. In order to make a photo book, I basically just get these sheets, which basically are just refills for a typical photo album. These are a little bit different because they are adhesive, and so the photos just sort of stick behind the plastic. What I end up doing is I chop off this side and I bind along this edge, which is where the plastic is actually firmly attached to the paper. I have about 100 sheets of these. I don't know that I'll actually use them all, but I'd rather have too many sheets than not enough sheets. But that's not the interesting part. Obviously, I'll show you the cutting and the binding and all of that when we get to the montage, but what I'm really interested in is a unique cover. So a unique experience of getting into the photo book. What I'm thinking is a cross-open book. Basically, when you open a book, you typically see this. It's a full front cover, full back cover, one spine, and it opens pretty simply. I like to complicate things, and so what I'm imagining, you have your standard back cover, you have your standard spine, but then you'll also have another spine, and the cover on the front will be split. And I'm thinking a diagonal split. So you open kind of top and bottom, and then the insides will be pretty standard. And I'm playing around with different ideas for what the locking mechanism will be, but I'm thinking we're going for kind of a steampunk vibe, so I'm thinking something with gears will act as the locking mechanism. I have the vaguest concepts in my brain, but before we can get to any of that, we need the text block prepared. It feels weird to call it a text block because it's photo pages, but that's still the technical name. So we're gonna jump ahead to the montage where I trim these and sew them together. I'm basically using a modified Coptic stitch, and I'm just sewing them one by one together so that there's a lot of flexibility because I need a binding that is going to be flexible enough to allow lots of photos to fit. And then I'm going to make an interior spine that the pages can adhere to that I'll then glue into the final book when we're ready for that. This video will really be in two parts. Part one is really the formation of the interior of the book, and part two is really the cover. So that bell was the chime to let us know it's time to jump into part one. So let's go! You're really far away, okay. Okay, so let's talk about what I did here. First of all, the fact that this does not close should tell you that this is a lot thicker than it was before. So typically in a signature binding, I would put this in my book press and that would help to flatten this. However, given that the entirety of the expanded thickness is due to the thread and not because of extra space in the thread, putting it in the book press really wouldn't do a lot to help out in the situation. It might just force it into a weird formation that I don't want. Right now we have a very loosey-goosey spine. I use a modified Coptic stitch, which is used primarily for single sheet binding like this. And so that gives the spine a lot of flexibility, which is what I want. Not necessarily so much in, the direction that I'm moving it now, because you don't necessarily want a book to be able to do the wave like this. But because these are photo pages, it needs to have space to be able to expand. Because as photos are added throughout here, this is going to get a lot thicker. Now the thread thickness does help. It gives me a good estimation of probably about how much it's going to expand altogether, which helps me figure out what I need to do for my spine. Because truly, I don't expect it to get much thicker than what I'm seeing along the spine here. However, this end is still significantly thinner. So, text block finished for now. This can just sort of sit in a box until we're ready to put it into the cover. And we're gonna move on to working on the covers. So just to kind of walk you through the next steps, I'm going to be grabbing some chipboard and I'm just going to be cutting out and measuring all of my pieces. I'm going to have 2 spines, I'm going to have 1 back, and I'm going to have 2 fronts. My chipboard is all 8.5 by 11, and I made my pages just slightly smaller than that, so that it would be able to fit and have all of that swell needed. And so there shouldn't be too much cutting. The back should really just be 1 piece of chipboard. The front will just be a piece of chipboard with a diagonal line through it. And so really the only parts that I'm truly cutting are going to be the spine. So I'm going to go do that, and then I'll come back when we're ready to start assembling things. Okay, let's go. I swear that like 87% of bookbinding is just waiting for glue to dry, but this is what we have of a cover. So we've got the triangular fronts, 2 spines, and then a full-on back piece. And it's all just sort of held together right now with this scrap fabric that I had laying around just to kind of hold the joints in place. They're pretty sturdy and they will be pretty much hidden by the time all is said and done. This will be kind of the main stretch roll piece within. So I'm going to take 2 of my book cloth sheets. These are 12 by 12, which if you know anything about math, you know that that's a little short when you consider just the back cover is 8.5 by 11 plus 2.5 inches for each of the spines, and then basically 8.5 by 11 for the covers. If my math is correct, which I was an English major, so it might not be, I should be able to use 2 sheets with a seam down the center of the back. I'm going to be using vinyl to cover that seam and hopefully make it look intentional. We'll see how that goes. So it's really just gonna be some more gluing. I think the last thing I'll be able to do tonight is just get those book cloth sheets attached. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that off camera, and then I'm just gonna let that dry, and then we'll come back tomorrow or whenever the next day that I work on this is, day 2 of this project, I guess. We'll check in with what needs to happen then. So I will see you for day 2. So here we are. Cover is all pulled together. Basic concept is here. Just opens like that. The inside is ugly, but we'll fix that eventually. I want to make this gray cover brown. You might be asking yourself, Kendra, why didn't you just use a brown book cloth? That's because I don't have any. I have lots of gray though. I have a ridiculous amount of gray. We're going to just put some paint on it and hope for the best. Once the paint is on and dried, I also want to hide the seam. It's something that I'm gonna make the judgment call once the paint is on, because I don't know what this is gonna look like once it's painted. But if the seam is still super visible, I do have this guy. It's just vinyl that's been sort of glued into a belt, and I can just pop that right over the center of the back there. We're definitely winging it. I feel like the back is always the part of the book that gets the least amount of love. The big thing right now is I just want to get this thing painted. I'm gonna paint the entirety of the back, gonna let that dry, and then I'm also going to paint a good amount of the inside. Just that when I go to do, they're technically end pages, but they aren't gonna function like end pages. When I go to put that in here, everything will look right. Okay, we're gonna do the thing. So at this point in the process, it's been a few weeks. So I don't know where I left you, but I can tell you where I am right now, which is this is all bound together and ready to go. And my cover, it could look better. I got some pretty gnarly air bubbles going on. Book cloth is something that I still need to practice with. I'm not very good at covering with book cloth yet because I've only recently started doing it. And it really likes to get air bubbles in it. I assume that's just because of all of the moisture that stretches the book cloth out and then it shrinks back up when it dries, and then we end up with these little unsightly pockets. It's fine because a lot of this is going to get covered. The book cloth is really more just as a reinforcement to keep everything together. And then on the inside I've also used a cloth and I painted it so it kind of matches. It shouldn't matter too much because ideally all of this will be covered anyway. So the next couple of steps I'm going to be kind of hit or miss on camera with. But what I need to do is I need to attach my block to the spine. Basically, it will sit like this. I need to cut a piece of chipboard that is slightly thinner than the spine inside the book, but about the size, if not slightly thicker, of the spine of my block, which I've got a fair amount of wiggle room, so it should be fine. And then I'm going to sew that chipboard to my text block and then glue that chipboard into the cover. The other thing I need to do is cover this crease here. It's not super noticeable in my viewfinder, but it is pretty noticeable. I don't intend to do a whole lot of work on the back cover, so I'm going to have this vinyl piece that I've already kind of pre-folded in so it's nice and pretty and smooth on the side, but I'm just gonna glue that down so it kind of hides my sins here. It should also help to cover some of those air bubbles, air pockets next to the seam. And then at some point in this whole process, I'm also going to go ahead and do my end pages on the inside, which the end pages are literally just going to be decorative papers to make this look better. They will serve no real function other than to just make this look better. I'm not quite sure what I'm doing for end pages yet, but we'll figure it out when we get there. The other thing, and the more, I'll say, fun part of this process will be working on the cover. I have my Nautilus gears here, so obviously they still need painted. They really need sanded first, but I'm actually going to move you down to look at the cover so you can kind of see what I'm talking about while I talk about it, so give me a sec. The general idea is that this mechanism will sit on top. Ideally, these will both still have the ability to kind of spin together while being locked down. That's the goal. Whether or not that is achievable is questionable, but that is my goal for right now. So what I will need to do is first figure out which cover I would rather it be attached to, because either way the book has to open both sides to be able to actually open it. But then I will need to poke a hole into whatever side it's attached to, making sure that everything sort of lines up the way that I want it to. I'm thinking I might use magnets because magnets make everything better, but also I feel like if I was going to do magnets, I should have done that before I put the book cloth down. So I'm not entirely sure on exactly how I'm going to make this work yet, but I know what I want it to look like. And that's like 90% of the battle right there. What I'm going to focus on first is just getting the actual functional part of the book done so that that is just ready to go, and then we'll focus on decorating the outside, because once the functional parts are done, then it's really all about the fun time. So yeah, we're gonna do those parts and then come back for the cover. Okay, let's go. Okay, let's pretend that I have done more check-ins than I have. I don't really remember where I left you off on the last check-in. It's only been a few days this time, not a few weeks, so that is progress. Just to cover some of what I did over that time lapse, I have attached pretty much all of my decorative elements. I did a collage for my end sheets, so I just took some paper that all sort of matched and tore it up and Mod Podged it all down. All of the decorative elements are attached. I am off camera doing some painting just to try to match some of the decorative elements, because when I painted the gears I used more of a coppery undertone and all of the other elements have more of a goldish undertone. So I'm just trying to sort of bring those back together a little bit to make them look a little bit more cohesive. So I think that pretty much catches you up to all of what I did in the time lapse. I glued some stuff down, I painted some stuff. That's basically what it was. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go to the final reveal and then come back and talk about the whole process. So final reveal time, woo! Okay, let's talk about this. This looks really dark. It's fine. So if you're just tuning in at home, there are some glaring issues, namely with the way that the gears line up. Part of that will be resolved once the photos are added. You can kind of see how it's really thick at this end, really thin at this end. As photos are added, this will double if not triple in thickness, so it'll even out, which will help the cover a lot. At that point, the gears will sit together so much nicer. I know when I was originally starting this project, I wanted the gears to act as sort of a locking mechanism, and to a degree they do. You can't really open one cover without the other. I'm content with it to this degree. I am not super mechanically minded, so trying to figure out a locking mechanism with gears that already aren't super commonly used anyway, not my forte. I don't know how well you can tell, there's still a little bit of a mismatch between sort of these decorative elements and the actual movable gears, but in all honesty, steampunk tends to be very hodgepodge together, and I think having it sort of mismatched works out. I am super happy that I was able to make these gears movable, even if they don't necessarily work together all of the time. I wish that I had something a little bit sturdier than the brads to work with, just because these do slide all over the place on the brad. It looks great when it's nice and centered, but then it starts to look a little bit off as it comes off center on the brad, and then there's just like a hole in the gear and the rivet is off to the side. It's a little thing that most people probably won't notice, but I do. One of the really important things for me with these photo books is that the pages lay pretty much completely flat. It makes it a much more enjoyable and comfortable viewing experience when it's not like trapped like this. So I try to make sure that everything is as flexible as possible. That's why there's not a lot of connection points between my text block and my spine. There's only really 9 total. 3 along the top, 3 along the bottom, and then 3 along the middle, and that is usually enough to keep everything in place. I've made a few photo books before that were used in public spaces, so the general public is touching them and messing with them. So I've learned a few things about what is and is not durable enough, and everything that I did here should be durable enough to withstand the general public. I like this strip on the back. It gives it a little bit of extra character and kind of helps to break it up. Otherwise this back would be so boring. And it gives it a little bit more character when looking at it from the top or bottom as well, although there is some glue stuck here. Initially I was really concerned about all of the air bubbles, but while I see them now, they're not super distracting. It's definitely not something that I want on all of my books. That is something that I want to try to figure out how to avoid, but I think it does add to the character of this thing. It gives it a little bit more of an aged look, like this thing is starting to wear and tear and fall apart even though it's brand new and sturdy. So I'm excited for this piece. This is, of course, another photo album that is going to be sitting in a public space as a tattoo portfolio. I'm really excited for how it turned out. I think it looks great. It makes me wish that I would have recorded some of my earlier photo album projects just to get a sense of what I have learned. In a lot of ways, this particular project is so much sturdier, yet so much less sturdy than my first project. The first photo album that I did, I sewed all to heck. There was so much sewing on the text block that there was no way for it to ever fall apart. It was completely overkill. I am glad that I did think about the flexibility of it. It was a very flexible text block. And yet at the same time, the cover was kind of wimpy. I used paper and a lot of paint, and I thought that the paint would help hold it up. And for the bulk of the cover, it is still holding up fine, and it's been a few years now, but along the hinge points, it is kind of starting to fall apart. I could probably fix it pretty easy with just some more paint and some paper and probably some actual cloth to try to sturdy up a bit more, but I do appreciate having actual book cloth now, which is so much stronger and actually made for this kind of thing. So I think that about does it. Let me know down in the comments below what you thought of this project, if I should make more book projects, if there are other things that you want to see me make or talk about. Also, while you're down there, give this video a big old thumbs up and subscribe to my channel because I post new videos every Friday and Wednesday. It's whatever Wednesday and a very stabby Friday. And I will see you next time. I hope you have a lovely day. Bye-bye! I think you can tell that my videos take a good amount of time just for how many changes happen to my personal appearance. Literally earlier in the same video, I had the nose chain going on. I'm pretty sure that I started this project when I had graying hair. It's fine. It is what it is. Okay.